You guys, how's everybody doing? Welcome to Wisdom Soup. We're here, is it already in July? I always have to check my calendar before I say that because I don't even know what year it is. So welcome, you guys. Welcome to the space beyond time. So we are, as you guys know, we are Wisdom Soup here today, which is we do Wisdom Soup the second Thursday of every month. And we've been doing Wisdom Soup for years now. Wisdom Soup was an important part of my journey as I stepped into my gifts, as I opened up to my own experience of spirit. And a lot of that was around the idea that I really needed to find other people who were interested in doing and thinking about the same things that I was doing and thinking about. So as many of you, some of you are still here with us today who were there as part of that original Wisdom Soup group. I literally rented a theater in downtown Bellevue. I put up a sign, like and I was the first sacrificial lamb, the first speaker, and like 25 people showed up. I thought, oh my gosh, there are other people in the world who are interested in this. And then it was going long and strong up until COVID. And then we went online, which has actually been an incredible blessing because now we have people joining in from all over the place, including Rebecca joining us in from Portugal. And we've got Dougie coming in here from California. And we've got people from all over the place joining in with us today, which is phenomenal. Aaron's coming in from the East Coast. So anyways, it has been, I think, one of the best things I love about Wisdom Soup is that it's an opportunity to expose ourselves to new ideas, that it's a place where we can continue to expand what we're considering, what we're thinking about. So on my journey, there was times where, like in the beginning, I am a person who I have more skepticism than is probably healthy for me, which is hilarious because I'm an angel channel, but I do. And in the beginning, I thought crystals were just rocks. I didn't believe in angels, all that stuff. And through the process of inviting people to come and speak, it opened my own lens, opened my own door. I got to have personal experiences with people who were deep in one subject, dragons, dreams, you name it, right? We've covered it all. And each time I feel like the doorway opens just a little further, a little further, a little further. Not exactly drinking the Kool-Aid, but it's that idea that you get to get immersed in something, to see something, to open maybe areas where you've had maybe been more reluctant, even fearful, right? I think that's one of the big reasons we resist spirit is fear of what we don't understand. And so talking to amazing people like our speaker today is an opportunity to help resolve some of those fears. So I know there are people who the idea of encountering spirit, especially the dearly departed, right? It can definitely bring up ghosts. There's a lot of stories that are fearful stories about ghosts. So I would love to introduce you to someone here today who will hopefully break through all of those fear paradigms for us. Dallisa Hocking. So you may have heard of her. Let me go ahead and spotlight us for you so you can find us in the group here. Hold on just a moment. And okay, let me get up there. All right. So welcome. So great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Anne. This is going to be fun. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think we should be afraid of our gifts and what we naturally are able to do. So I'm excited to talk to your group today.
fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, this community is wonderfully open and high vibe. So I think you're gonna love it. You're gonna love the vibe here.
Yay.
Yeah, so I loved getting to know you. You have been on your journey loud and proud for quite a while now. And I know you had, your background like most of us, like you were like a normie out in the world and doing normal things. And then all of a sudden you had this crazy like experience, mediumship experience of seeing, you were staying with a friend, his aunt passed, and then the aunt came to you in a dream, right? This was your like, oh my gosh, I can do this. But it wasn't totally new to you. You came from, and you describe yourself as a fifth generation psychic. Is that right?
Yes. So it all changed 10 years ago. I was actually a dating coach and a matchmaker, and I was hosting singles events and not planning on doing any of this work. But my grandmother used to see full body apparitions with her physical eyes, and she would make predictions. And we'd sit in her living room and talk about, what was the ghost wearing the night before that walked through her living room. And so I was used to talking about all of it,
Yeah.
but I didn't think that I was going to be a psychic medium as my career. I, it's really an accident because I don't believe in accidents, but it's an interesting synchronicity.
Yeah, yeah, that is, I love, I mean, like how lucky to be born. And I'm always, we do it by choice, right? We choose our family, but how lucky to be born into a family where, like, you had a grandmother that this was normal. This was Tuesday. Let's talk about the ghost from last night. So amazing. So, what was, like you said, she made predictions. What is a conversation with her that you had that really sticks out in your mind? Is there one that really made an impression?
I was a little kid sitting with her one day, and she called me Lisi. And she'd say, Lisi, I have this ESP that I'm getting that you need to have a stage name. And I was doing ballet and tap lessons and, doing local theater. I was like, okay, maybe I'll be in some production one day. And she said, yeah, I think you should call yourself Dallisa Del Rey and practice writing your name. Here's some pen and paper, sign your name. And years later, I was invited to start a 90-minute psychic stage show in Las Vegas. And I designed the set to actually look like her living room and named the production company Del Rey Productions. And would
That's
tell that story as I would stand there on stage. My grandmother predicted that I would need a stage name one day, having no idea that it was going to be for this.
That is so, so awesome. So, one of the things I love about listening and getting to know you and your work, I think just as a role model, as a way shower for how to embrace our journey, for how to get started, right? Because we all have to start somewhere. Like, clearly you are loud and proud, like I said, doing the work and serving a lot of people right now, but you didn't start there. And I think the way that you started is I think really, really helpful as a model for others. So could you tell the story about how, like, because you went from having a dating company, working at a university, and then something happened, and where did you start? What was your first step?
Yes. So when I was on that trip to New York, where the friend's aunt came to me while I was sleeping, I woke up the next morning and walked out to the kitchen and said, hey, Peter, your aunt came to me, and here's what she looked like, and here's what she said, which simply put was that she was okay, that she had made it to the other side. But then, I'm a Gemini rising. So my brain started, going a million miles a minute. And I flew back to Texas where I was living at the time and thought, wow, okay, so if Aunt Barbara, who I'd never met, didn't know anything about, could come through and deliver a message, like, what else am I missing? Like, is a light switch turned off? Like, how do I get this thing to stay on? So I naturally just felt compelled to start doing more meditations, and I would use more of like a binaural beat kind of meditation and just get out a piece of paper and a pen. And I was doing a beta test early on. So I reached out to people that I knew but didn't know what was happening in their life necessarily like then, and
Yeah.
just said, hey, would you be open to this? And I'd write their first name at the top of the piece of paper, put the headphones on, go into meditation and start channeling. And I would write down everything that I would see, hear, feel, just as part of this test, this curiosity. And then I would get on the phone with the person and say, don't tell me anything. Let me get through what I wrote. And so many of them, like, I didn't tell anybody this. How did you know? And so
Mm.
then I thought, oh gosh, this is so much bigger than just Aunt Barbara. So I kept pulling that thread and practicing and, learning how to read oracle cards. And then, it just grew from there. But I think what served me well in that first phase of the exploration was I was approaching it through a lens of curiosity,
Yes.
not through like it has to be a certain way or this is what I've seen on TV. It's like, let's just throw caution to the wind and see what shows up.
Yes, I so agree with that. And that really mirrors my first experiences too, is very much, hey, and I did the same thing with friends. Hey, I'm gonna tomorrow at 11, I'm gonna try to see what I can read for you. And yeah, same exact thing. And it's that idea of not being afraid to be wrong. Is just trying it, see what happens. It doesn't have to be right, no attachment, just trying it, having fun, right? Having fun with it. Yeah. So, okay, so then you decided to go pro, which is not an easy choice, right? Like when did this happen? And then how did you get started doing it professionally?
Yeah, so I thought, well, I should probably leave Texas and go back to Las Vegas where I was living previously. I was an executive in the hospitality industry. The family lived there. I'm like, if I fail miserably, at least I'll have like a place to go, a hot shower, a meal, somebody will feed me. So I go back to Las Vegas and I decided I was going to go work out of a room in a woman's spiritual center that she had. So I had this little cubby in the back and I thought, well, let's just, flip that light switch on and see if anybody shows up. And it started just getting really, really wild with the amount of people that were coming in for sessions. I remember days very early on. So this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And the spiritual center would put out an announcement, oh, Dalisa's here doing 20-minute readings for $20. And I would literally do like 16 sessions back to back.
Oh,
And one of the things I remember that's kind of curious about that whole time was I would do these marathons of all of these short sessions. And anyone that does these kinds of readings or channeling, it burns, at least it burned me out. It felt
yeah.
like I had my finger in a light socket. So I would drive home and I'd have to stop at Arby's and get a roast beef sandwich to get some protein because I felt like I had depleted everything in my
Yes.
physical body.
I can't even, I mean, that is so intensive because it's the hard thing is going in and out to one person, then another person. It's so many different energies that had to be so exhausting. But what a trial by fire, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sure in that you probably had some where you felt like it was a home run and some that felt like they were harder. I mean, like what that must have been in the beginning. I'm sure you had those moments of like, okay, it's just things are not working today. Did that happen sometimes?
I think what I experienced more so was that occasionally somebody would show up that wanted some kind of proof or wanted to hear
Mm,
something very specific, like a key word that they had been saying over and over that morning. And some people would show up defiant, like,
okay.
oh, let's see if you really can get what I'm looking for you to say. And but I learned that part of that journey is that you have to be willing to stick up for yourself and have that confidence.
Yeah.
So I do think that you have to look at what you have gotten right and the success that you have had and the people you have helped and what that has meant to those individuals so that when somebody tries to knock you down, you can say, I guess I'm just not for you and that's okay. And I wish you well. And sometimes it's really just a frequency match or a mismatch.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you're not good at it or that you can't do it. Just may mean that you had a little bit of a curveball and they're meant for someone else. And so you send them
Yeah.
off on their journey.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And that's I think that is like the wisdom of having been doing it for a long time because I think there is that thing in the beginning where we're trying to figure out our gifts and it can feel like there's not that sense of solidity in that like knowing it's true and knowing it's yours and knowing it's there, there and so it's easier I think in the beginning to feel like, oh gosh, maybe I did it wrong or so it's so nice to but yeah, I mean, I think if we could all embrace that from the get-go, from the beginning it would make the journey so much easier. And it's the whole thing of not being attached to the outcome, not being attached to how the person receives it, just understanding we are the channel and all of us, right? Every single one of us has spiritual gift. We are the channel for spirit. And however that's going to come through, right? We don't get to dictate. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Because
Yeah.
there'll always be some people that will come along your pathway that are not meant for you, but
Mhm.
it doesn't diminish your worth or your value. And I believe that if you're getting a message, whether you're seeing it, hearing it, sensing it, it really is meant to come in and for you to explore how you're going to say that or give that message to the person you're sitting with. So it doesn't necessarily always make 100% sense as it's coming in
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
saying it. But I think part of it is trusting that spirit doesn't waste a thought or a message. And so if it's
Yeah.
coming in, there is something to it. And so I think it's more about perhaps sometimes the interpretation because I
Hmm.
think of myself as a language interpreter between the human and the universe and spirit world. And so, sometimes the interpretation just needs to be looked at a little bit more.
Yes, yeah, love that. So, and one of the things I want to focus a light on is the fact that in the beginning, what you did was really hard. You know what I mean? That you were doing this in the back room and people were coming in, but you put yourself out there in a really big way that was like an investment. Like that's almost like going to graduate school. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you're going to do the work to build. And I imagine that you probably from that probably built a roster of clients. Is that true?
Oh gosh, it became so intense with the number of people that were coming in or calling or stopping by that I remember being in that back room several times where spirit started saying to me, "You're going to start your own place. You know, you're going to have different practitioners and teachers, and you're going to open up a spiritual center." And at first, I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, fine, whatever," trying to like brush it off. But I'm sure we've all been through this where like spirit gets louder, and then
Uh-huh.
you realize like, oh, okay, I guess this is part of, the story and how this is going to unfold. And so I took a leap of faith and I actually ended up leaving that spiritual center and starting my own place. And I thought, oh, a bunch of people were going to follow me from that spiritual center and come all the way across town to Las Vegas and, still come and see me for sessions. And there actually wasn't that many people that
Oh,
followed me over there. But why I share that is Spirit brought in a whole bunch of new people that were aligned with that energy of that place that I started and what I was building. And so sometimes we can't see the staircase,
yes.
but Spirit gives us enough that gives us that nudge to say, would you just trust us and we'll catch you? And it might not look exactly like you think it's going to look, but you're going to be taken care of and you're going to get through this. And it's part of what your soul signed up to do in this lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely. And by the way, there's several people in the comments that are definitely have been through exactly what we're talking about here. Rich is saying it's from messengers like us that he has learned to pace himself, not be shaken when he doesn't have an energetic connection with someone. Yeah. And Josh just says that he says that he doesn't personally don't believe in the concept of coincidence. Yep, totally agree, Joshua. You're totally right on that. Yeah, and then Rebecca's commenting, the universe is hits you with a 2x4 when spirit gets louder. That idea of like opening up the uh the the spiritual center. So the that transition put you in a place where, and it's so interesting that people didn't follow you necessarily from one to the next, but at the same time, the energy was flowing. You know what I love about that is we've been talking a lot about how we're going through a period of rapid change right now. That with the shift in consciousness, and there's the potential for a lot of unraveling. It's already been happening, but it's increasing, right? This unraveling. And one of the things the angels have been saying a lot is that it's okay if you're putting a lot of energy into something and then that one thing goes away, because what matters is the energy. So to me, I think your story is a great example of here you were putting all this time and energy in. And yes, were you building up a client base? Yes, but it was you. You were the thing that was building. So you moved from one to the next and the people didn't come, but you still had that energy. And then the people just magically attracted. It's like a vacuum and they showed up. Is that how it felt for you?
Absolutely. And I think looking back, I could have gotten discouraged of, wow, people aren't going to drive in traffic to come across town to come and see me. Like, I thought that they liked me, right? Like, you can go down that spiral of self worth. But in
Oh,
hindsight, it's like, oh, Spirit had a much different plan in place. It
yes.
was okay because then, of course, COVID happens. Everything in Las Vegas was shut down. And so then that led into even the next chapter of the story, which was
Yeah.
very different from the spiritual center that I had
Yeah.
opened, and having that trust and faith that moving everything virtual was going to be okay and that it was going to work out, because then I had to pivot in a big way again. And so I think the more that we can just trust that unfolding, I think the
Mm-hmm.
easier it is.
I'd love to that. I think with each of those, as you are like, as we get more and more on our path, I mean, this is true, I think universally, as we get more and more on our path, then our frequency shifts. Like we go through our own upgrade. So it seems to me like as you're talking about this, if you went from the spiritual center to your own center, to each one gave you the opportunity to attract and to create a higher vibe container, that as you were going up, 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 up in your own vibration, it's interesting to see how that would have just naturally provided you with a better environment for you to then expand, right? To expand. Did it feel like when you went from the spiritual center to online, did that feel expansive, or more of a, like, how did that feel at the time, and how did that unfold for you?
Felt like the wild, wild west because I really hadn't done anything online in that kind of way, or
Yeah.
that much of a reach that I was hoping to get. Because, you're, at least for me, I was in this mindset of, okay, if my budget is this and I have to do this many sessions and teach this many classes, this is what I need to have happen in the course of a month. So
Yeah.
to take that into a different container that is wide open on the internet, you have to really think about, well, who am I now? Like, what am I talking about? And are people going to want sessions that find me online? And so it ended up morphing, I would say, in these last 5 years into more of creating spiritual content, sharing, the channelings that I'm getting, and teaching more classes and having more and more people come together as a community all over the world, rather than what I was used to doing, which was, okay, did I book all the session spots this week?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
feels much more expansive, I have felt, moving this into the online space.
Yeah. So it's, and so, and somewhere in the middle of this, you had a Vegas show. So like, like, how did that, like, where did that fit into this experience? When was that exactly that you were doing that work?
Yes, it actually happened right before the pandemic.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
So everything had launched. I was doing the performances and I started to feel really heavy inside of the showroom. Like the energy just felt like a heavy blanket. And
Mm,
I had been making predictions that 2020 was going to be a year like nothing we'd ever had experienced before. There was going to be food and health issues and all these things. And so I shouldn't be that surprised, right? Like looking back, that 2020 was what it was. And I don't regret putting all of the time and energy into getting that show started. Now, Las Vegas, they shut down every showroom, all entertainment. And so then I was forced with really just going online and doing everything there. But
wow.
what ended up happening is a few years later, I had an invitation from a casino in Western Washington. And
Washington.
yay! Said, "Oh, yeah, we'd love to have your show here." And I
Wow.
thought, "Whoa." So everything I had done in Las Vegas wasn't wasted. I don't think anything is ever wasted. We can look at each opportunity, even if it didn't turn out the way that we thought it would. And like the
Yeah.
idea and the vision that we have, it's like, oh, it's getting you ready for these other things that are coming along your pathway that you just have no idea about yet.
Yeah, yeah. That, I love it. I love that. And I think it is important for people to know, because there's, like I said, there's loads of people in our community that are very, very gifted, and but it's to see like where you are today, to know where you started was like in the trenches. And that's true for all of us, but your story I think is wonderful. And I think it's so inspiring for people to know. It's like, it's really, I think it's just like, if you just show up, if you just keep showing up, and you did get thwarted, like pandemic came and you had this show and the show is gone, and like you just kept showing, okay, then what do I do online? So I think it's so important that if someone feels the call to use their gifts, in service to others, it's just, I think it's really, really helpful to have that example and that model of like, this is what it means to keep trying. And this is what it means to work hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's
Hmm.
not all going to work.
Yeah.
Spirit's even showing me, as we're having this conversation, the symbolism of like being a football player with the football, and
Uh-huh.
you're, having to bob and weave and spin and
Mhm.
try to get into the end zone, right? That's what it feels like. It feels
Yeah.
like you're kind of doing a bob and weave and you try something and it may or may not work. But if
Yeah.
you look at it as like, huh, I wonder why this didn't work the way that I thought it would, and you're willing to look at it with curiosity and pivot, then you're just better the next time you go to try something else. But I say keep trying, because eventually it'll start clicking into place and you'll start understanding more and more of your business or what you're really wanting to do. And you don't have to fit into any kind of cookie cutter formula. You can
Right.
blaze your own path.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely agree. And I think it's helpful that for so many, I think it's just the fear of coming out and saying, this is what I do. And yeah. So and I think in all of those processes, and this is part of the reason I think it's so helpful to talk about, is that it is part of the journey, is that overcoming that fear is part of the journey, right? Overcoming like every one of those obstacles that we bump against is showing us some place where we don't believe in ourselves, or where we don't, where we're not really open to the depth of what's inside of us. And so I think it's just so helpful to recognize this. Like sometimes if you just keep showing up, and it helps you to work through. And it's a healing experience, right? It's all a healing experience, which I think is amazing. So,
Yes.
okay. So I wanted to ask you, as a medium, because I know you are psychic and you do many things, but you're also a medium, which is one of the gifts I don't have. I don't speak to, I don't talk to dead people. It's one of the things I don't do unless they're like right in someone's field. But when people come through, when you channel for example, when you're like in the like the Vegas show and you're calling on the audience, and like the way you see mediums working, is there such a thing as an unhealed ancestor or someone that comes through? Is everyone that comes through, are they all like to a place of like love and compassion, and they're coming in just to say good things? Or do you ever get like that person that comes through that's like spiteful or like still has a grudge?
You're giving me the chills with this question. And so sometimes there'll be an energy that will come through like an entity, which isn't a departed loved one, but that can be attached to someone that I'm reading for. And
Yes.
usually that'll show up with some kind of addiction energies, drugs, alcohol, gambling, you name it.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a example that just popped into my line of vision as you asked that question. I remember early on in that back room, that woman's spiritual center, where one day a man and a woman show up, and the man is pretty quiet, and I start seeing that his dad is coming in behind him. And his dad actually stepped forward to apologize for the abuse that he had done to his son. And his son was not expecting his dad to come through, that message to happen that day. And so I think that healing occurs on the other side. Based on my experiences, whatever we don't heal in this lifetime, once we leave the physical body, it doesn't magically disappear. We continue that work on the other side. I think that there are beings of light and love that help us do that work. Um, and so I've had spirits come through that are trying to convey a message because they feel like they didn't say it when they were here,
Yes.
and they want to make sure that their loved one hears that message.
Yeah. So they are predominantly in love. It's not a there's nobody coming through to like give them one last jab and say those jeans look terrible on you or nothing like that.
I don't remember any kind of situation where that happens. Thank goodness, right?
Yeah.
Um, but usually it's from the place of, I wasn't the best to you,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, and I feel like I need to apologize to you. And
Yeah.
frankly, sometimes the client is ready and sometimes they're not.
Mm,
Because they could come in for, a psychic reading, and there's somebody standing behind them that's like, hello,
mm,
hello, and so and I trust that if they're there, all right, let's talk about it. But
yeah.
there's been varying reactions over the years depending on who it is that steps forward and what they want to say.
That's interesting. So it sounds like most of the messages that they would bring forward would be ones of like I know the first one you mentioned where where your friend's aunt came through, and it was basically to say, I'm okay, like don't worry about me, I'm all right. It sounds like that's a lot of messages of reassurance, like I'm okay, or resolving unfinished business. Is that right? Is that sort of the main types of messages that come through?
Yes, most of the time it's, we're okay, I love you, this is what I'm doing on the other side,
That's fun.
helping to guide them in this lifetime and what the client, the sitter is asking about. So I'd say that is most of it. Usually clients come to me that want reassurance. They want to know either that they're making the right decisions in their own life or that their loved ones are okay. And they are. And yes, you're on the right path.
Yes,
You
yes.
know, that sounds so oversimplified, but we get in our head so much about, should I move? Should I take that job? And it's like, if even if you feel like you're on a little bit of a detour, spirit's going to nudge you back onto the path that is in your highest and best interest. So keep the faith, keep moving forward. But I don't necessarily think that we can severely screw this up so bad that we can't figure it out and get back on our path while we're alive.
Love it. Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious, you mentioned that they might talk about what they're doing on the other side. What are some of the craziest things you've heard that spirits are doing on the other side?
Had one lady come through one day and she said, tell her I'm an orientation leader on the other side. I was like, what? And she showed it to me like she was like college campuses where you sign up and you're the new student and there's somebody at orientation. It's like, let me show you around campus. This lady was like, yeah, I'm doing orientation for souls that have passed over on the other side and I'm
Wow.
helping reorient them, back to coming back into this space and it reintroducing them to where they can go and different resources and tools that they can tap into. So I thought that one was really interesting. I still see people regularly that spirits that will talk about hobbies that they had in this lifetime that they're still doing.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've seen that we can still enjoy like fishing, right? Or if we enjoyed making model airplanes, we can still do things like that, which sounds so wild in my human brain because I'm like, how does that work if we're energy? But I just feel like we're in this different frequency. It's like we're moving next
Mm.
door. So I do think a lot of the things that we've enjoyed while we're here are things that can still carry forward.
That's so interesting, isn't it? I remember hearing once that someone crossed over and that she was a compulsive cleaner. And she ended up like, because there was no sense of time, she ended up spending 3 months like wiping the dust off of like one end table, just like wiping and wiping and for like 3 months. Like, does that match anything you've heard or seen?
Yes. And what's interesting with that example, I have seen some spirits that are in an in between energy.
Ah,
Because to me, like cleaning an end table for 3 months sounds horrifying,
yeah.
right?
Right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. But I have had experiences where I've seen people that have passed away that are attached to a physical location.
Mm,
So the haunted hotel I had my show in Las Vegas, they had a room up above the hotel where a lot of spirits would gather. And so I would go in there and I would ask, does anybody want to go to the light today? And it was mixed. There would be some that would say yes, some that are like, no, I'm not done here yet. I want to stay here. Sometimes it happens when somebody's been killed and they don't know what happened. So there's still like a
mm.
lingering question about it. So there was somebody that had been murdered really unexpectedly and I had access to go into that space and answer a few questions for him. And he knew that I could see him.
Oh,
I think we
wow.
like radiate some kind of light or antenna, where spirits know. And so he asked a couple questions. I asked his loved ones that had passed away already to come down into the space where his energy was stuck. So they greeted him. He saw them. A big light opens and then up he goes. So
Wow.
I think bringing in friends and family, and he starts realizing, like, oh, I'm supposed to go to this other destination now. That
Mm.
can usually help. But I've moved spirits over to the light many, many times.
Wow, wow. So interesting about because so Andrew in our community asked the question about that in between space, like whatever that in between space would be. And he's wondering if it ever happens that someone gets stuck in that place and becomes, dark or problematic for people, people around them. Is that he's wondering if that's something that happens.
I do. I think that someone could get stuck in a space and feel unresolved. And if their feeling of being unresolved is attached to something negative or a denser energy, think they can be in that space trying to either work through it or trying to prove a point,
Yeah.
so if I'm in a physical space and I can do it inside of a home or an office, or I can do it remotely, go in and see if there's an energy in there. I can see what the energy of that space is to see why that spirit is still lingering there. So
Mm,
sometimes it's that they died in that house and they don't want to leave, and you're in my house and I don't know why you're here. And so I'd like you to leave. So there
yeah.
can be that agitation, but it's part of that unresolved part of their energy of why they're staying.
Yes.
But more often than not, it's the loving, peaceful, I'm okay. But every once in a while, I come across some energy that's stuck somewhere, and they get to choose if they want to stay there or leave.
Yeah. It always comes back to free choice, doesn't it? So I heard about there's I think it's called the Arthur Henley School of Mediumship. Have you heard of that in the UK? It's a big
I've
one.
heard of it.
Hopefully I
Yeah.
said the name right. But it's really well known. It's been around for, it's like one of the like original like OG mystery schools. And but one of the things that really struck me about that is they talk about, like, I think it's called ectoplasm, like literally like Ghostbusters. Like apparently there's an ooze or a slime that can come through mediumship. I gotta ask you about the slime.
I don't think I've ever had plasma slime coming out of me or around me. Um, my family might call the authorities if they see something happening like that. But I do think that spirits can make things appear.
Okay.
So I can't rule it out. Maybe that's just what happens to some mediums that are doing, mediumship practice. But I heard a story the other day where a spirit had thrown a penny across the room and, hit the wall, and somebody's sitting there watching it, right? And there's nobody there to throw the penny. So I
Yeah.
do think they can make objects move, but I also think it takes a lot of energy to move
Yes.
something. And so I don't think it's something that we should be expecting to happen, or, move something to prove you're here. Gosh, I just think it takes so much for them to be able to do that in our frequency,
Yes.
because their frequency is so much higher. But I think when they do move something, pay attention. I have had technology, the TV, a light switch, a radio, things like that. That seems to happen more frequently rather than moving a physical object, in my experience, because it's a frequency moving a frequency. And so they're able to change the TV or the light switch a little bit easier than trying to move something that has physical weight to it.
Yes, and that makes sense. I think that we see that in like back in the movie Ghost, which many of us have seen the movie Ghost, which is a fun movie, but how exhausts them when to move something. It just yeah, it's like, I think that's what we've seen that portrayed in Hollywood, but I think it's accurate and it's the same thing. I relate to that. Like when I connect with the angels, especially in the beginning, it was very draining, very draining. And it's a lot to move into, I think, a different frequency. So someone corrected me. Thank you, Pam. The name of that mystery school is Arthur Findlay. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. So I wanted to ask you. So you today, some of your work, at least, if not a lot of your work, is teaching others to do what you do. You teach to people to help access their intuition and their spiritual gifts. Isn't that right?
I do.
So
Yeah, that's most of my time now these days.
yeah. So I would love to ask in terms of for people to understand sort of what is it like in terms of being in your course or working with you? Like what is it, what would you say are some of the main things you focus on? Like what types of things do they do in order to try to develop that with you?
Yeah, I think one of the core principles and things that I would tell anyone, regardless if they're my student or not, is start with simple things that you can do at home, like guided meditations, or if you like binaural beats, for example, and putting the headphones in and listening, or doing automatic writing or channeling. Those are all pretty straightforward things that you can start doing, on your own. But I also talk about frequency a lot because I've been asked many times over the years, well, what's the difference between a psychic and a medium? And the way I explain it is, spirit's frequency is really, really high, and psychic energy is kind of in the middle, and humans are down here further. And depending on what emotion or frequency they're radiating at, will depend on where they're at in that frequency scale. And so I like to focus on, well, how do we get our frequency higher so that we can get higher up the scale, into psychic insight, getting downloads, and then, potentially getting into that mediumship zone, which is an even higher frequency, because psychic energy, once you start working with it and you get used to it and you've been doing it, it gets easier. I think it gets lighter. It gets a bit easier to do readings on other people without feeling so exhausted. But
Yeah.
I found that mediumship is a whole other animal. Um, it can feel very heavy because, at least in my experience, I'm feeling the emotion that is connected to the person that's passed and the
Mm.
emotion of the client that's sitting there. And so I am this processor in the middle that's feeling all of these things come through. So it can be incredibly intense. So I
Yeah.
think that, at least for me, teaching people how to tap into their intuition by raising their frequency, and if they're interested in mediumship, how to do that in a way that feels approachable, so that you don't get in there and go, wait a second, what the heck am I getting myself into? This feels so heavy,
Yeah.
because psychic and mediumship work is really quite different energetically.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do want to go back to, you mentioned the binaural beats, which were created by Robert Monroe. Do you mind explaining what those are for people who don't know what those are?
Yeah, and the company that I have used, which I have no affiliation to, is called Sacred Acoustics.
Hmm.
Dr. Evan Alexander is involved in that company. He had a near-death experience. And so when you have your headphones on, the music, the meditation music, is designed to put different sounds into the right ear, into the left ear, for example. And it helps to get your brain waves into a state that helps you to bring in more of those messages and be more sensitive to the information around you. And so, quite literally, in the very, very beginning, because Sacred Acoustics was at the retreat I was attending in New York when all the things happened with the Aunt Barbara story. So, I had been meditating with this music, and I would take the 20-minute recording that they had, and that's what I would listen to as I was channeling and writing the first name of the person, and
Hmm.
writing down everything I was getting. I would have that in my ears as I was channeling. And that's why I go back to what I said a little bit ago about me, those that are sensitive and empathic and have these gifts, which I think we all have these gifts. There's a light that's either radiating out of us or some kind of antenna. And so when it changes our brain waves into a state of being able to download more information, it feels to me like the brain frequency expands. And
Hmm.
so with that light expanding, I think we're able to pick up more information around us, around other people. So I think it helps that antenna to get stronger.
Oh, that's very, very cool. Yeah, yeah. So I've heard of them also called hemisync. It's I think the Monroe Institute calls it hemisync, but I didn't know even Alexander doesn't too. That's very cool. But a great tool if someone, I think it's interesting to share that that was one of the things that helped you to open up. So very, very, very cool and very helpful, I think. So I wanted to ask about and thank you also for the description in terms of how you help people in terms of connecting and starting to explore their gifts, and because that is, I think, having, like, it's possible to kind of go down the path on our own, but having help is it's always good. You got to have help. We're meant to be helping one another. That's kind of the point why we come here. We all have gifts so that we can help one another. So, but I wanted to ask you, as we are heading into the shift in consciousness, how you thought spiritual gifts might change or how they might show up differently.
Mm. Yeah, I have chills through my whole body. So spirit uses that wave of chills through my body as like an exclamation point of like, hey, did you hear me? Pay attention. So I guess what I'm about to say really needs to be underlined. I feel like we're headed into a space where the boundaries between humans, in a beautiful way, dissolve more. So the feeling I actually was getting this week was somebody living in one country versus somebody, living in another country that will be connecting with each other more through, telepathy and feeling energy through all time and space, right? That we're not going to be contained necessarily to a type of technology that we may or may have, or do we have the money to go see them in that other country and connect in person? It will become more and more easily accessible to connect with somebody's energy verbally, non-verbally, but through energy.
Yeah.
So we're going to be feeling each other more, which I think will be interesting. So I love that, we're all open to this, we're having this conversation, and even energetic hygiene and
Yeah.
boundaries with that. And because we could become all of these really open, aware, empathic sponges,
Hmm.
and that could potentially mess with some people's psyche of like, what's happening? Why am I getting these psychic downloads that I never had before? Why was I just thinking about Bob and Bob just called me? Like, what's happening? Right. So we think potentially that sounds really exciting, that we're going to be using more and more telepathy and meeting in different time and space and dimensions. And but for a lot of people, that is not what they're used to. And maybe they've never heard of a conversation like the one we're having today. So I
Yeah.
think there's going to be an ebb and flow to how that manifests and what that's going to look like. But I just feel that we will come more into a place of being in connection with each other and animals and nature, where we really will be feeling more of that one consciousness, perhaps more than we ever have in this lifetime so far.
Yeah, I love that answer. Yeah, totally agree. And I think that the telepathy everyone's mentioning, of course, the telepathy taste, which was so fascinating. And to me, it brings up the question about like in our current 3D reality, wrestling with the expectation of privacy with the concept of unity. And to me, that is, I think, one of the things that we're going to have to break down and break apart and rethink as we move into these higher states of consciousness and these gifts, right? Which is greater connection. So then some people are going to go right away to, oh, can they read my thoughts? You know what I mean? Like, what if I didn't want to share that thought? Like, what if that was a me thought? And so I think it's going to be an interesting thing to navigate. Like, one of the ways I came to peace with the idea that my guides are all around me all the time and the angels are always with me. And like, what about when you got to go to the bathroom? Like, the way that I came to peace with that was understanding that they don't see us the way we see ourselves, like that we see each other as physical bodies, they see us as energy, like the same way that we see an angel as like a ball. Well, they see us that way, right? Isn't that how does that match your understanding?
Absolutely. And I think we're all light, we're all energy. And yeah, I think we're going to start to notice that more and more. I think people will start seeing auras
Mm-hmm.
around people and animals,
Yeah.
and like, why is that tree glowing? Right. So Spirit said to me recently to please tell people, announce, I'll say it here too, that if you've been feeling called to be a life coach, an energy practitioner, card reader, if you've been feeling that nudge, yes, like
Mhm.
I feel like you should step in, and Spirit's like, please remind people, because I do think that this journey that we're headed into with the increase of frequency and the consciousness becoming more and more of our everyday life, there are going to be a lot of people seeking out people to help them and to guide
Yes.
them. And
Yes.
so if you're feeling the call, this might be your
Mhm.
nudge from the universe today.
I love it. I love it. One of our community members was asking, Louise was asking about the realm of the deceased, and she's wondering if it's on a certain plane, like a certain frequency or a density. How would you describe that? Like how it is different from where we are, or
It's such a
how we are, I
brilliant
should say.
question. Yeah, brilliant question. Whenever someone steps in from the spirit realm, they, generally speaking, will step in front of me and within, that line of sight. And they are hovering up over the ground. And they've always said, we're not in some far off land. we're next door. And so the way that I have experienced it feels like they are in a frequency that is apart from this frequency, but has a bit of a overlap that they can come in and access. But I just think that they're vibrating at a different frequency. So it's why changing our frequency is how we can work with that realm and get information, whether it's from spirit guides or angels, galactic beings. It's all a frequency match. And so I
Yes.
think through this work, we embody that frequency. And that's why we're able to access information, just like attuning ourselves to the Akashic records or the Hall of Records and getting information on past lives. It's just a match.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that they are 1,000 miles away or what, or they're on another planet. It feels like they're here, but just in a different frequency. Hopefully that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think of it as like if we are going to go back to your analogy of like the radio antennas that, that we are these receptors, it's almost like if there's all these different bands, just like on the radio, where there's different bands along the radio and you turn your dial to tune in to whatever frequency. But I feel like as receptors, as the antenna, that we come pre-wired to access certain, so like mine are pre-wired to hit, like I channel the angels and that's my frequency. And I can't get to the one which you're tuned into, which is mediumship. Like that's just not part of my, I'm not built for that. My wiring is different. So I think it's like we have different, yeah, that's the way I understand it is like, how was each of us engineered to do for our specific life journey and the path that we're on. But yeah, but it's like, what do we tune into? I think we can be modified. Like, I think we can say at one point, oh, I want to do this. And then we can develop the skill, I believe, as long as it's not in conflict with our other gifts. But yeah, yeah, very, very
Yeah, it
cool.
makes sense. I describe it to people like some people are born with that wiring,
Mm-hmm.
and other people work the muscle
Yes,
and then
yes.
they develop it and then the wiring, gets set. So I think everyone can at least develop the psychic abilities, and
Yeah.
maybe not that you need to go out and make predictions for, your neighbor or your friend, but developing enough of the psychic awareness inside of yourself to know that you are receiving information even for yourself, for life, and that we don't have to try to turn on all the signals of sight, of hearing, of knowing, of feeling, that we may have one gift that's just a primary that we can
Yes.
have that we're working with. And maybe you have chills up your arms or the back of your neck, and you're like, wow, I'm feeling this. So I know that this is either that I'm hitting on something important or that spirit's around or my angels are saying hello. So just paying closer attention to those sensitivities that we have with our psychic senses.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Andrew was asking an interesting question. He asks, what is the burden of unhealed trauma on telepathic receptivity? So do you see that with your students when you're teaching spiritual gifts? Do you find that unhealed trauma can get in the way for people?
Ooh, such a good question. I don't think we're ever going to be totally unhealed in this lifetime. I think, it's a lifelong process of healing different parts of ourselves and what we've been through. And so I don't think we should ever aim for perfection in that, unless you embodied to reach enlightenment this time around. But so I wouldn't aim for perfection. However, I have seen that whatever we're going through is like a filter, like a coffee filter
Yeah.
of, okay, well, the information's coming in, but it's going through whatever my coffee filter is. And then,
Yes. Yes.
so if you just got in a fight with your significant other and you're like, I gotta go do a session, right? And you're sitting down to do it, you're like it come out of you based on what you as the human has
Yeah.
as your energy. So I usually tell my students, either don't drink alcohol or don't drink it 24 hours before you do energy work. Watch what you're eating, because certain foods will either raise or lower your frequency. Like if you're eating a lot of processed food or a lot of sugar or a lot of heavy foods, that
Yeah.
can slow down the frequency and make it harder to connect.
Yeah.
Um, but I've noticed like the unhealed parts can seep through That's not something we're actively working on. So I would say
Yeah.
try to get as neutral as you can before you do energy work or a reading for someone. Just think about, you could ask yourself, like, what's my coffee filter like today? And if you think
Yes.
it's a little dirty or it's got too many coffee grinds in it, maybe meditation or do some breath work, drink some extra water, get that energy moving or do some yoga
Yeah.
or some swimming. Get the energy moving up and out of you so that that's not what's in your energy field as you're working for someone else's energy.
Yes, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's important that people feel free to develop their gifts knowing that they're imperfect, right? Like knowing that we're fine. Like there's like if we were perfect, we would be one with God. And so so like we are gonna have some junk. And so I think it becomes the obligation becomes to explore and understand our junk so that we hopefully it doesn't get in the way. Like to strive to be as clear of a channel of spirit as we possibly can. But that doesn't mean like start now, just be self-aware that we are fallible, right? Yeah, to be self-aware. Yeah, I love it. So I wanted to let everybody know, and I want to, because everybody's going to want to know. Oh, one last really important question. Someone's asking, let's see here. She's asking if you have one of the binaural beats that you really liked a lot. Is there one that you would recommend that is your go-to?
Okay, so a little inside tip. So if you go to sacredacoustics.com, again, no affiliation.
Yes, yes.
I should. They should offer me a
I
deal
know
the next time I
exactly.
talk
You
about them.
gotta.
I'm teasing. So if you go to sacredacoustics.com, they have it where if you put in your email address, they will send you a 20-minute free download. That is
Nice.
literally the audio file I used in the beginning and still use today. They have longer ones and different themed ones, but I would say go try the free one and
Yeah.
see what you like with it. But that's the one I go to all the time.
Love it. That's so great. Thank you for that. That's a wonderful, wonderful tip. I love it. So I know Dawn's already like, I just went on and did it. That's really cool.
I'm sure they appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. It's really, really great. So I want to let you guys know, those of you who know, we have our Soul Society, which is our online group that Delisa is now going to come and join us there for an after party where she's going to be doing some spot hot seat readings for people. So if you guys are a member of our Soul Society, make sure you come and join us there now. And then, how can people find you, Delisa, to know more about how to work with you?
Yeah, I would go over to spiritandspark.com, all spelled out. Uh,
Great.
I've got my classes on there. I just want to quickly mention I do a class each month called the community class. This month is all about the other side and what happens when we pass away and what our loved ones are doing. It's all by donation. And so I don't set a price on that. So come if you feel called to do it, but that's under the classes tab.
Very awesome. Very, very awesome. Thank you so much. And if you guys want to come and join us in Soul Society, it's not too late. It is, let's see, Wendy and Kira, could you guys drop a link on how to join us there? Let me make sure it's in there. Perfect. All right, you guys, thank you so much for coming to Wisdom Soup. Thank you, Delisa, for a phenomenal and very fun conversation, my fellow Northwesterner. Although you've defected, although you're still like technically in the Northwest, so I'm still calling you neighbor.
Deal.
All right, you guys, we'll see you for Wisdom Soup again next month, always on the second Thursday of the month. Thank you so much for being part of this community. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, you guys.